Have you ever come across an especially cool D&D character design and thought, dang, my characters are out here looking like NPCs? That is a whole protagonist. When you see a drawing or a miniature or hear a description of a character design that's unique and full of personality, you might think the person who created it is just really good at design. They sat down one day and said, let's make a D&D character. She'll look like, I don't know, this. But even for people with strong character design skills, it's a process. And I promise that process can be learned. Even if you aren't a visual person, even if you have no experience with character design, you can absolutely come up with a look for your D&D character that is uniquely yours and cool as f***. We're gonna start with choosing a theme. Then I'll share my 4-step character design process, and finally, we'll talk about all the ways that you can communicate that visual to your fellow party members or maybe even to an artist that you're commissioning. I'll be using this character as an example to demonstrate each step along the way. But we're kind of putting the loot before the dungeon here. Let's take it back to step 1. You probably already know the basics of your character up front, their species, class, and maybe their backstory and personality. But this process can also work in reverse, where the visuals inspire the character. In this video, we'll be taking an existing character concept and designing visuals for it, which is what I assume most of you will be doing. In this case, I'm gonna use Blasphemy, the tiefling warlock that we created together in my video about building a 2024 D&D character. Now, wait a second, Ginny, you might be saying, you're gonna design another tiefling? Tieflings are easy mode. Of course, a character with rainbow-colored skin and cool horns is going to look interesting. And you know what? You're right. 9 out of 10 dentists agree tieflings are just cooler than everyone else. So in order to demonstrate that this process can even work on species with no built-in aesthetic perks, we're gonna create Blasphemy not as a tiefling, but as the most boring species in D&D, humans. Why are you booing me? I'm right. People like to say if you need pointy ears or purple skin to make your character interesting, you're not a very creative person. And to counter that, I offer you this. I have to suffer through being a human every day of my real life. Let me be a cool-looking Technicolor sexy fantasy devil when I'm playing my silly little games. Anyway, I've also painted myself a lot of colors recently and I'm tired. But no matter what kind of character you're making, we're gonna start with a central theme. This theme will guide our entire design process. It can be a specific theme like astronomy or snakes, or it can be an abstract theme like duality or hope. This doesn't necessarily need to be a literal representation of your character's backstory or arc either. You're just picking a vibe. What's the vibe you want people to get when they see this character? Do you want them to think, wow, beautiful, or wow, badass, or wow, I hope this doesn't awaken anything in me. For Blasphemy, I'm choosing the theme Fallen Faith. She was raised as an acolyte under the name Sacrament, a divine virtue name given to her by her temple. But when she started learning about her god's enemies, she found herself, let's say, rooting for the wrong team. Apparently, hey, these guys make some good points was not an acceptable theological position. So the temple stripped her of her name and cast her out of the only home she'd ever known. She renamed herself Blasphemy, half as an act of defiance and half as a sort of self-inflicted penance for her sins. Because she literally named herself after her fall from grace, I think it makes sense that her outward appearance would also be built around that. It's clearly the way she wants to be seen. Aww. Little edgelord. If you don't already have an idea of a theme for your character, you can always pull inspiration from the mechanics of your build. Blasphemy's concept is entirely built on the contrast between an acolyte background and a Pact of the Fiend warlock class. But don't let your build restrict you either. Just because most rogues wear all black doesn't mean you have to have a dark theme for yours. Just because most druids are dressed like a garden center threw up on them doesn't mean that's the path you need to go down. In fact, if your goal is to create a unique character design, you may want to avoid common themes like that. You could also just pick something you like and then reverse engineer a theme from that. So if you just really like the visual of, say, a Luna moth, then maybe your theme is the moon or metamorphosis. Or if you're really into the idea of your tiefling's horns being made of crystal, then suddenly your theme is caves. Or alternative medicine. Seriously, they'll cleanse your aura and cure COVID. I read it online. Now that we have our central theme, we're gonna pick a color palette. 1 to 3 colors that will define your character's overall look. Color has a huge impact on the feel of a design. In fact, palette swapping a character is such a quick and easy way to change a character's character's vibes that it's sometimes even used as a plot point. Here are a few of the most common options. First, you can go with neutrals only. Using just black, white, and gray can give you an understated look, like Gandalf the Grey, or a classic rogue in all black. Or it can be quite striking, like Anne Hathaway's White Queen. But just a warning, in most cases, wearing all black in a D&D game is a quick ticket to a forgettable design. Next is the single color palette. This is where you pick one color and make it your whole personality. It's cohesive, it's simple, and it says, I have a very specific vibe and I refuse to apologize for it. You can also pair a single color with a neutral to sort of tone it down. Pairing black and white with a single accent color can really make that color pop. For example, both Drizzt and the Jolly Green Giant have single color green palettes, but they still have very different vibes. I mean, the Jolly Green Giant is clearly a strength-based build for one. Then we have two color palettes, where you introduce a second color to spice things up. There are lots of ways to pick interesting color pairs. Complementary, split complementary, analogous. I haven't taken an art class since high school, so that's about the extent of my expertise here. If you don't have a good gut feeling for what colors would look nice together, pulling up a color wheel website can give you some tried and true combinations. It's also worth noting that your color palette isn't just about what your character wears. It also includes their hair, skin, even their eyes. If you're designing a character who has unusually colored skin, like a tiefling or a genasi, or a really striking hair color, I find that adding a second color instantly makes that character feel more unique. If I'm creating a purple tiefling, my gut tells me to pair that with white or black or a darker purple, but giving them green or orange in their hair or their clothes immediately makes the color scheme more bold and interesting. In my opinion, a 3-color palette is about as far as you should go unless you're specifically aiming for a ran away with the circus kind of design. Too many colors used without intention can make a design start to feel busy very quickly. Bards, feel free to disregard and carry on adding colors. If you're not sure what colors to use, color theory can be a great resource here. The general idea is that certain colors evoke certain emotions or associations. We associate the color red with danger, but also with sex appeal. Blue makes us feel calm, yellow makes us feel happy. Turquoise makes us feel like a mermaid, which is why we spend 4 hours at the salon every 6 to 8 weeks and can't use white towels anymore. That said, don't think of color theory as rules that you have to follow. Sure, we associate yellow with happiness, but you could also design a very badass rogue with a black and yellow color scheme, like a deadly wasp-inspired assassin. In that context, yellow isn't gonna feel so friendly anymore. So don't let color theory box you in. Just consider using it to spark ideas if you need inspiration. For Blasphemy, my color scheme is going to be black, white, and orange. White has a very pious, cleric-y vibe, so I'm incorporating that to signal her acolyte background. But I want to symbolize her fall with fire, like hellfire. Black is the color of char and soot, and when something white is burned, it turns black. And orange, of course, is the color of fire. In her intended tiefling form, her skin would be orange, but in human form, we'll find other ways to incorporate it. By now, you should have a central theme and a few colors picked out for your character's palette. Next, we'll go through a 4-step process to turn those general vibes into a specific character design. But first, Tasha has a few words for you about today's sponsor. Well, well, my old friend Mordenkainen has written his magnum opus. He always did love to hear himself talk. Worlds and Realms is an official Dungeons & Dragons licensed book published by 10 Speed Press, celebrating 50 years of the iconic game. You'll learn the lore of the multiverse across all 5 editions, narrated by renowned Archmage Mordenkainen. I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure I'm a key figure, the legendary Witch Queen Tasha. It's illustrated with enchanting classic and original artwork. Like this one. Of course the old gossip's written about my tryst with the demon lord Grazit. A tangled web of mutual seduction, he writes. Look at him. Can you blame me? If you, like me, after a long night of discussing planar leyline theory, tire of Mordenkainen's ramblings, you'll love the exclusive short stories by Jalee Johnson, Jody Hauser, Eric Campbell, Jasmine Billar, and Jeffrey Golden. Despite such devastatingly accurate descriptions of me as at once both brilliant and irritating, Worlds and Realms is a must-have for your library of dusty old tomes. It's available now at the link in the description. And yes, I'll sign your copy, provided you deface the Lord Mage of Greyhawk properly with some well-placed googly eyes. If that doesn't leave you in stitches, well, I've got a spell for that. Now that we have a theme and a color palette, we're ready to begin my patented, copyrighted, trademarked, and totally official 4-step character design process. Please note, any unauthorized use of this process is totally fine. I'm not the boss of you. I like breaking down a character's design into 4 aspects. For each aspect, I like to pick at least one notable thing, letting the theme and colors that I've already chosen guide me. Also, if one of these aspects just doesn't speak to you, you can totally skip it. I would just recommend adding an extra design element to one of the other aspects to make up for it. The first aspect is, what were they born with? These are physical features that your character has had from day one. This could be something subtle like freckles or ice blue eyes that they got from their dad, or it could be something more dramatic like tiefling horns or draconic scales. Maybe she's born with it, maybe it's heterochromia. My tiefling augury was born with huge naturally golden horns, a combination of her mother's infernal bloodline and her father's divine magic. My centaur Artemisia isn't half horse like a lot of centaurs, but half deer, so she has antlers as well as all the extra legs, just to make it even harder to get through doorways. Species and class can have a big effect on this, but they don't have to define your design. Yeah, Goliaths usually have markings on their skin, but if you want to play a Goliath with no markings, you totally can. In the lore as written, Goliaths think these markings symbolize their destiny, so being born without them could be a really fascinating story hook. Remember, in a game like D&D, you're a main character, not just another person in the crowd. If any tiefling is going to be conspicuously born without horns, it's going to be a main character. It's okay, expected even, to break the mold a little, so don't let your design feel constrained by your species. Your choices don't need to be a perfect match for the stuff in the rulebook. They just need to get the thumbs up from your game master. Also, even if there's an obvious choice here, your design will be more interesting if you push past that. So sure, your halfling is short, but maybe the most notable trait they were born with is their startling green eyes, or their birthmark in the shape of a muffin. That's right, they're the chosen one. Prophecy foretold the halfling who would unite the bakeries. For blasphemy, in her original tiefling form, I would check this off the list by adding fiery golden orange skin, curling black horns, maybe eyes that glow a little like embers. These elements line up with both her color scheme and the fiendish pact that led to her fallen faith. Part of her story is that she wants to believe that she made her own choices, but she also has this fear that her demonic heritage is ultimately what decides her fate, and she has no real power. But we can just as easily have a human character born with a fiendish mark on her, maybe just the unusual orange eyes, or tiny horns protruding from her brow, or fingertips charred black. You don't have to play a tiefling in order to play a character who was born under a demonic omen. Now that we've got what were they born with covered, let's move on to the next aspect. What has their upbringing left them with? This is where we really start to bring the backstory into play. Or if you don't have a backstory, at least your choice of background. These are the visual elements that come from where or how your character was raised. Maybe it's a certain style of clothing traditional to their culture, or an accessory that bears their noble family's crest, or even a traditional tattoo like the Dalish Valasleen from Dragon Age. My character Wisteria was born into generational wealth, so she wears a bunch of jewelry. Mariska, who was raised by a sea hag, wears clothes and accessories made from things that you would find underwater: discarded ship sails, fishing nets, seaweed, and pearls. It looks nice, sure, but try not to think about how she smells. Choices like this don't just add flavor, they ground your character in the world. If there's anywhere in this process that you'll want to discuss with your game master, this is it. They might have some existing world building that you can pull from, or maybe your ideas will be so good that the DM just steals them and makes them canon. The ultimate honor. If your character is intentionally trying to distance themselves from their past, this aspect can still show up in subtler or more subversive ways. For example, a runaway noble might wear a cloak with a ragged edge where they cut off the once fine embroidery. A character raised in a cult might wear a scarf to hide the cult's brand on the back of their neck. Even if they're rejecting their past, those roots still contributed to who they are, and incorporating small symbols of that history can lend meaning and depth to a design. For blasphemy, this part of her design comes from her acolyte background. She wears the white cloak of her temple, but it's been burned at the edges as a result of her fiendish pact. It's both white and black, in line with her color scheme, and it matches her theme of fallen faith, because it's both a reminder of where she came from and a symbol of what she's lost. Basically, her cloak is doing a lot of heavy lifting. The third aspect on my list is, what have their experiences left them with? This is where we start adding the marks of what your character has been through: scars, trophies, or other physical reminders of their past adventures or struggles. For some characters, this may feel similar to the last aspect. How distinct these two are depends on how much life your character has lived between their upbringing and their adventures at the table. If your character is fresh out of the nest, these things might overlap a lot. This process is more art than science, so you can interpret these prompts in whatever way makes sense for your character. My character Ashling's design represents this aspect with a glass glass vial of soil that she wears around her neck, a symbol of her warlock pact with the Lady of the Soil. It's dirt, but make it fashion. Meanwhile, my half-orc barbarian Necrasha has a scar on her face from the fight that got her exiled from her clan. But I'm sure if you asked her about it, she would make up something much less embarrassing. We're going to answer this prompt for blasphemy with abyssal symbols on her face, the mark of her pact. These symbols brand her as a servant of her demon lord patron. They are a very literal sign of her fallen faith theme, and of course they match her palette. They're really ominous and mysterious, unless you can read abyssal and then you realize that they just say live, laugh, burn. When thinking about your own character, consider what they've been through and how it might have left a mark on them, literally or figuratively. Did they lose a finger in a sword fight? Or maybe they wear a keepsake from someone they lost, like a sibling's military uniform jacket or a ring from a past lover. You can always return to your theme and color palette for inspiration. In an ideal world, this is the kind of detail where if another player at your table asks about it, you get a chance to deliver a little dramatic monologue while gazing into the middle distance. Lastly, our fourth aspect, what have they chosen for themselves? Or, to put it more simply, fashion. This is the part of their design that comes down to personal choice. Tattoos, piercings, makeup, hairstyle, clothing. It's where you get to ask, how does your character want to be seen? Do they want to look powerful, trustworthy, sexy? Do they care what people think of them at all? A character who dresses to command respect might wear a perfectly tailored coat with gold embroidery, while a character who doesn't want to be noticed might stick to drab, practical clothing. If your character waltzes around in a canary yellow loincloth and nothing else, they probably want to be noticed. Or they lost a bet, one of the two. This is where your character's personality can really shine. My changeling character Nick makes the deliberate choice to wear her true changeling form, something unsettling and unusual, because she wants people to feel a little unnerved. My medic character, Elowen, wears practical, blood-stained clothes because she genuinely doesn't care how she looks. She's too busy saving lives. And then there's Edith, the matchmaker, who wears gaudy clothes and heavy makeup because she wants to be seen as desirable. She's a hopeless romantic who's waiting for someone to fall madly, passionately in love with her at first sight. It hasn't happened yet, but she's not giving up. For blasphemy, we'll answer this aspect with the broken holy symbol of the god she once served. She chooses to wear it openly, even though it's upsetting to basically everyone, the followers of her old religion and her new fiendish allies. It's a bold choice that reflects her defiance and the complicated feelings she has about her past. She doesn't hide from it. Instead, she drags it into the light for everyone to see. When considering this aspect for your character, think about what story they want to tell the world just by walking into a room. Do they want to look like they've got gold to spare? Or do they want to seem too dangerous to mess with? Are they hiding something, or are they showing off? This is the part of their appearance that's fully in their control, and it says as much about their personality as their actions do. When you see me, a person who always carries a sword, it tells you something about me, that I'm a huge nerd. With at least one interesting thing picked out for each of these four aspects, or just 4 interesting things total if some aspects didn't speak to you, you should have a solid foundation for a character design that feels unique, specific, and full of personality. No more generic elf ranger number 87, but instead a character who tells a visual story as soon as they step into the room. Not every single detail that you've chosen needs to perfectly align with your color palette or your central theme, but when you step back and look at the big picture, everything should feel cohesive. If something doesn't quite fit, this is the perfect moment to tweak your visual choices or even adjust your theme or your palette so that everything feels intentional. It's also worth noting that the last 2 aspects, what their experiences have left them with and what they've chosen for themselves, can and should change over the course of a campaign. As your character levels up and goes through new adventures, their appearance will reflect that. Maybe they earn a new scar from a boss fight, or change their clothing to reflect internal changes, or get bangs after an NPC dumps them. With a thoughtful design in place, the next step is making sure that the rest of the table, or an artist if you're commissioning one, can see the awesome character that you've built in your mind's eye. I often represent my characters through cosplay because that's a visual medium that I'm passionate about. A lot of illustrators draw their own characters for the same reason, but you don't have to be an artist or a cosplayer to share your design. Much of D&D is imagining complex visuals based on nothing but a verbal description, and and this doesn't have to be any different. A good description can paint a vibrant picture. If I describe my character Morelia as a sweetly smiling wood elf with a homely dress of sage green and off-white, a pointed green hat decorated with trailing leaves, and a riot of tight blonde curls, you probably already have a solid mental image that looks a lot like this, even without a visual aid. That said, there are tons of tools out there to help you create a visual representation of your character if that's what you want. Video game character creators like Baldur's Gate 3 or Dragon Age Veilguard or other fantasy RPGs let you build characters with an immense amount of detail. Miniature building platforms like Hero Forge or Eldritch Foundry are also great options for a fully customized head-to-toe look at your character. Or you might put together a collage or a Pinterest board. You can pull inspiration from all kinds of sources: an actor or model whose face you like, a photo of a certain hairstyle, another for their outfit, and another for their weapon. And of course, you don't have to be good at drawing in order to draw your character. I'm sure your fellow players will enjoy seeing your version of what they look like, even if it's not going to be hanging in the Met anytime soon. I've had so many illustrators tell me that even an unskilled drawing can be an incredibly helpful tool for them when they're working on a commission. It gives them a clearer sense of what's in your head and helps make sure that you're both on the same page. Your stick figure with horns and a glowing sword is valid, I promise. I hope this process helps you come up with visuals for your characters that are exciting for you. Also, if you have any tips that have helped you design characters, please share them in the comments. And if you're looking for more tips for your character's clothes, check out this video that I made a few years ago where I interviewed artist and cosplayer Tough Tink. She's done a bunch of the character designs that you've seen on this channel, including my Winter Jester and all of Ashling's wardrobe. By the way, my friend Antonio from Pointy Hat just launched his new Arcane collection, including this incredible sweatshirt, which I love so much. I'll put the link in the description in case you want to check it out. Not sponsored, we're just friends. Okay, bye.